Today I have a special guest, Mr. Scott Holland. He's an industry expert in keeping and breeding jungle carpet pythons.
Not just jungle carpet pythons, but all subspecies of carpet pythons. So, I mean,
Okay.
we actually started breeding carpet pythons almost 20 years ago.
Oh,
So we started with IRHAs actually, and then we went to coastals, and then all the morphs, the jaguars, and eventually
nice.
a lot of the subspecies. So
Okay, so but would you say you specialize in pythons, or do you step outside of pythons? Do you do like boas or?
no, we breed boas, pythons, colubrids. I tend to specialize in the carpets because that's just kind of where my heart was at. Like early in the days, nobody wanted to work with carpet pythons because they had a reputation of being bitey and nippy, like retics would be. But it's actually kind of a bad reputation because it's like nature versus nurture. So as you work with the animals, they're actually very docile as they get to be adults, as long as you treat them well as babies raising them.
Okay.
So
Um, how would you say you got into reptiles, first of all?
as a kid, like most people, just as a kid running around, picking up boards, rocks, anything to see what kind of animals we could find in our area. I grew up in Villa Park.
Okay.
So in that area, it was kind of neat because we'd find fox snakes, and we had the Chicago garters and the Plains garters that we could find in the same kind of areas. So, and then decay snakes, the brown snakes. So that's where it started. And then as a kid, being just a tiny kid, 7, 8 years old, looking for that stuff. It wasn't until I got older and moved out of the house that I got into the pythons and boas. And
Okay. Yeah, I'm the same way. Like I when I was a kid, we used to go herping and looking for frogs and turtles at the local ponds.
mm-hmm.
And then one of my buddies, his dad took us to. He was originally the first swap I knew was the Lee Watson reptile swap in Streamwood,
Sure.
and we go there and it was just a barn packed with people with tables, deli cups full of turtles, snakes, lizards, frogs, tarantulas, everything, and it was just fun. So I got in the hobby that way. Didn't have a snake for a while. I had a corn snake for a little while. My friend bred them, but definitely was a turtle guy for the most part. But now I'm starting to get into snakes, and definitely was interested in a carpet python. So I kind of connected with you, reached out to you, and wanted to pick your brain about what you do, animal husbandry of carpet pythons, and if you can kind of give us a background of what is a carpet python? At least what's the history of them, and what do you know about in the industry? What's their range, and what kind of snake are they?
Well, the carpet pythons got my interest too because the size they get, they don't get super huge, but it's the teeth that people get intimidated by. Like we were talking about earlier, like people get intimidated by the nippiness or whatever they are, and they can have a painful bite. But like I said, the docile of working with them for a while, and what got me into them a lot too is because they were from Australia
Okay.
and New Guinea, and they came in with New Guinea in the early years. They were called Irian when I had them. Now they call them West Papuan carpet pythons. But that's because they were started importing those animals in 2002 and
Okay.
after. So my collection comes from the original animals that were imported from Irian because at the time it was called Irian not West Papuan.
Okay.
So from like 1972, I think, until I want to say 2002, it was Irian. Before that, it was Irian Barat.
Okay.
So but all that comes from the ports that they actually export from. So you'll see a lot of times, even with green tree pythons, you'll see Manakwari, Jaipura.
Okay.
Those are actually the ports they kind of come out of. So they collect the animals and they kind of export them at that point. So before the Irian came into the United States, the jungles were here and the coastal carpet pythons were here. So the Irians were like the biggest new thing from New Guinea,
Okay.
but they were being exported through them. So they've gone on a slightly different evolutionary path, the Irian because they're the smallest of the subspecies of carpet pythons. And I think a lot of that has to do because they're an island form.
Yeah.
And being they're from an island, they tend to stay smaller than like the mainland carpets. So you think of like coastals or jungles, those kind of animals because they have bigger prey to prey upon.
Sure.
So, and the other thing that's kind of neat too, because their patterns evolve through time to kind of fit into their niche of where they come from. So the Irian are a tri-colored carpet python compared to jungles are usually 2 colors.
Okay.
But in the hobby, what you see now with jungle carpet pythons aren't actually true representation of what actually happens in the wild. In the wild, they're more of a kind of a brown, more of a cream instead of the deep
really?
black and the bright yellows.
Okay.
But they've gone on a different evolutionary path. So the jungle carpet pythons, for where they come from, the deep black and the bright yellows, well, because they're arboreal and the canopies are thick.
Yep.
So as they want to blend in their surroundings, so as the light shines through the canopies, it casts an array of light through the canopy into it. So they're able to blend in their surroundings, getting more blacks and yellows to hide within the shadows and the brightness of the sunlight.
Oh,
so they went on a
okay.
slightly different evolutionary path compared to like where Irianjayas and the island form. They want to blend into situations of the colors of the trees.
Okay.
So it's kind of unique. They all have the same kind of body structure in a sense. Some are smaller, some are bigger, but they still have that same basic look.
Okay.
Different. It's like custom paint jobs for a car.
Yeah,
in a sense,
right.
When you start getting into the morphs, especially.
Okay.
And selective breeding changes the path of the color that they take in the long run.
Yeah. Well, here's Jennifer who wants to say something. I guess.
Hi. I don't know how the audio. Hopefully, it'll pick you up if you talk loud enough. But that's cool. Yeah, exactly. Like I studied some biology in college, and evolution biology is fascinating. So with these animals and with morphs, you think of how the animal changes over time to better survive its environment, and like you mentioned, yeah, exactly. With bright sunlight and then shadows, it's just kind of blending in with those bright yellows and blacks. So, what did you start out with? Or if we could backtrack.
Mm-hmm.
What would you say? Just a couple of the most popular species of pythons, and then sizes. About like how big would they get?
Like I was saying, the Irianjayas are the smallest of the subspecies, and they tend to be, from what I've experienced of hatching, they tend to be the most docile, even out of the eggs, as far as not being aggressive. The jungle carpet pythons the Irians, they say that they get 4 to 5 feet, but my adult animal that I have, one of the original animals that was imported in the United States in 1993, 94, right around there, she's still alive. I still have her,
Okay.
and she's like 8.5 feet long.
Oh wow.
And so
Big mama.
she's really big. So with that stock, we've been breeding what we have now, but it takes a long time for them to get to that size once they're adults. So the Irianjayas will grow quick and fast, and then they'll actually breed at a quicker rate than most of the other subspecies.
Okay.
So they say you can breed them at 18 months, but that's probably the males that can do it. The females need to be at least 2.5.
Okay.
And I've never had success. I didn't even try breeding them at 2.5 years. I usually wait till like 3.5 years, and that's when I'll breed them. See, carpet pythons too have on their heads, they have really unique heads, but it's like concave and convex.
Okay.
So when they're babies and hatchies, they kind of have a convex head where it sticks out, and as they mature, it indentates into its head, being more convex. When I start seeing it being convex, I know they're getting close to where they need to be as far as a breeding age.
Okay.
So they're the smallest. But then the jungles they get up there in size too. They can get up there around 8 feet. Is typical 7, 8 feet. Well, again, it takes a little while to get that big. The coastals are the biggest. I've worked with those and bred those also. And mine in my collection were over 10 feet, and people were like, I've never seen one that big. Well, mine were.
Yeah, exactly.
But again, they were older animals. So you got to give it time, and they'll get there.
Okay. So, what would you say out of all the subspecies of pythons or carpet pythons? What would you recommend as a first snake? Would you say like an Irianjaya or jungle carpet or a coastal?
The Irianjayas are super friendly. The Bredls or Centralian, Bredlii, people call them different, as long as we're all talking about the same thing, however you pronounce it. They tend to be really docile out of the eggs also, and very gentle. The coastals are probably the nippiest I've ever worked with, but I've gotten just about all of them to calm down as adults. There's always a few of them that won't, and it doesn't matter what you do, they're just going to be mean. It's kind of like I was saying earlier, nature versus nurture. Like I have 2 kids. I raised them the exact same, and now that they're adults, like one bites, the other one doesn't.
Yeah.
You know, I raised them the same.
Right.
So the carps can be like that too. No matter what you do, there may be one or two that are just going to be
Yeah.
mean. The jungles, I've always got them to tame down. I've never had an adult be super mean and aggressive.
Okay.
So out of the egg, when they're babies, they tend to be aggressive because they really think you're going to eat them.
Yeah.
So their first thought, you're the first thing they're seeing. So like, oh my gosh, is he going to
Exactly.
eat me? And then after some handling, they realize, hey, this isn't so bad. I actually enjoy this.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think like from if you're going captive bred, which I highly recommend, would you also say
Absolutely.
way to go?
I don't even know if you can get imported animals at this point. You might be able to get imported, they call the West Papuan now, you know, which is like further down the line from what I have. They say they're still important those, but I have never really seen a wild caught one.
Okay.
You know, I haven't seen a wild caught carp python for probably 20 years in the hobby.
Sure.
So it's kind of like what's here is here, you know.
You really
Okay.
can't get anything out of Australia anyway.
Okay. No, I hear you. So you're saying, yeah, Australia is hard to import. Now with these carpet pythons and the different species, what would you say a basic setup would be if someone's just getting into snakes, or if they've been a snake keeper for a while? What would you recommend as a basic enclosure size, basic setup for one of these snakes?
I kind of use the same ideas when they're babies as I do for the other animals that I have, like whether it's colubrid or boa constrictor, is that the animal should be able to go around the perimeter of its enclosure without touching its head to tail.
Okay.
And being the carp pythons are arboreal, if you give it a branch, something for it to climb on, it's going to use it as a security blanket. It's going to feel more comfortable. But if you put it in too big of an enclosure right away, all of a sudden it feels exposed and feels like wait a minute, I was secure in a little place, and now all of a sudden you put me in too big of an enclosure too fast. And so then their attitudes can change quick, and all of a sudden they get cage aggressive or go off feed because they're scared and they're nervous.
Okay.
So you want to kind of keep the enclosure small. As they grow, the enclosure should grow. So as adults, I have my animals in my custom-built enclosures that I build, but they have room for big branches and things to crawl around on.
Okay.
So as adults, and that's really important actually when it comes down to breeding too. I don't know if I should go ahead and just get into that now.
Yeah, we can segue into breeding.
But the thing about breeding, what's important with the cage is set up is once they get to be maybe 2-3 years old, you want to take them out of what a tub situation would be and put them into an arboreal cage where they have glass and they can see the changing of the light. All my breeding cages are all facing the south.
Okay.
And they have sunlight that comes through. The sun doesn't directly shine on the cages, but they can sense the sun changing as the seasons change. So when it comes into the breeding season, the sun's getting lower in the sky. The sun's not up as long.
Okay.
And they actually sense that it's getting close to the breeding time at that point. Where people make the mistakes of breeding them, they may have success of breeding them in tunnels, but they're not going to have as much success as if they had them in, glass cages facing the south where they could see the sun changing.
So like a rack system for carpets is going to be harder to produce good.
To be a breeder, it's going to be harder. I mean,
Yeah.
you may hit on it, but you're not going to be as successful as if you had true arboreal cages with the glass and the branches.
Okay.
Because especially the first time around, when I've noticed with any of the species of carpets, the first time breeding, they like to dangle their tails. And they like to they use the branches as security at the same time, but they like to dangle their tails at the same time. After the first time of breeding, they're like an old married couple. They'll breed on the ground and,
Yeah, wherever.
if it's a proven pair, you probably have success. Like if you bought a breeding pair from somebody, you put them in a drawer, you'll probably have success with it the first year or whatever. After that, maybe not. I'm not sure. I just don't breed mine that way.
Yeah, I hear you. Well, and I think too, I mean, a lot of people do keep reptiles and amphibians in rack systems, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But if you're able to, have an enclosure, have something that simulates a little bit more of a naturalistic type setup, I think that's just overall better for the health of the animal.
Yeah, well, with all snakes, like people tend to think that snakes love heat and light. Like, oh, I gotta have they love heat and they love the light, and they actually like the heat, the underbelly heat, so they can thermoregulate and digest their meals.
Yeah.
But they do not like sunlight. They would much rather depend on their color patterns to blend in
True.
and hide The only reason they tend to come out in the sun is because they need to thermoregulate to digest their meals. So then that's when they're exposed. That's when predatory animals are going to feed on them.
Okay. So would you say are carpet pythons diurnal, or are they more like a nocturnal?
They're actually both. They're
Okay.
active at both times.
Both times, okay.
Yeah, they say Ariangeyas tend to be more nocturnal than the other ones, but I find them both to be active at whenever.
Okay. If you're cool with, I know you brought some snakes with you today.
I did.
If we want to show our viewers some snakes and then kind of break it up a little bit that way, and then we can keep diving into the breeding.
Sure, I got to pull an animal. Jennifer, want to pull an animal out? You're right next to him.
All right.
So I brought an Iriangaya carpet python with me today, and I brought a jungle carpet python so that you could see the difference of how their patterns can be really different.
Cool.
And something to think about is when you get into captive breeding of any snake, from no matter where it's at, they had the wild type, which would be the wild type pattern that they would have.
Yeah.
But once you actually breed it in captivity, subconsciously you're putting your own fingerprint on the animal because beauty is in the eye of the beholder.
Yeah.
So you will take two animals that you perceive as being the pretty animals and breed those, and whether you realize it or not, you just actually put your fingerprint on it because you selectively bred them. You put those two together, where natural selection in the wild, they have to kind of meet with each other and
there's a lot of random.
They're going to be opportunistic in that way.
Exactly.
So here, this one is a Iriangaya.
Yeah, it's very interesting because, within the hobby, everybody, like you said, we perceive things differently. Everybody finds different things attractive and different colors, different patterns on these reptiles. And so that's why you see variability in the marketplace. But I think some breeders have a better eye for the beauty than others. So
it is, and it goes in fads. Like our Iriangeyas tend to be have a lot of striping to them. And that comes from the original mother animal, the original one that was the wild-caught animal we got. And so it works in a polygenetic mode of inheritance when it comes to line breeding with the stripes.
Okay.
So right now the phase is all like, some people call them tigers. I just call them striped. But eventually people are going to fade out of the stripes and are going to want the banded ones back again, like they were originally 20 years ago. Exactly. And then eventually they'll be all banded going around again. And so I might work on that again too, start holding things back that are more banded instead of the stripes, because eventually people are going to want something that's different and more unique than what they're used to seeing.
Exactly.
So I don't know if it shows up on camera, the different colors, the tricolors of the Iriangeyas.
Yeah, I mean,
we hatched this guy in 2008. He produced a clutch last year of 9 animals with his girlfriend. So this year we'll be able to breed him with her again. So carpet pythons in general, you can actually breed them 2 years on, and then you have to take a year off. And then you go 2 years on, take a year off. In the wild, they would never do that. In the wild, they'd maybe breed once, and they may not breed again for 2-3 years. Because they're opportunistic feeders. They don't have the constant food supply that we can give them in captivity.
Okay.
This guy is actually Uranus, if I'm not mistaken. Is that correct, Scott?
Yeah, he's 2008 animal.
That's the animal, Uranus and Pandora, who we most recently had animals online, and we had some customers purchase through Morph Market.
Okay.
So this is F1, even though this is 2008. This is still F1 from the original animals that came in through Bushmaster in 1993 or 94. So the offspring we've been producing off these are F2. Then after we go to F2, then we actually outsource and clean up the genetics.
Okay, so
but these are still the original lines from the original imported animals.
So for someone who's not super familiar with breeding or generations of species, F1 would be considered what? It would be the first offspring of that original line?
Of any two animals that you would put together that are unrelated would be F1. So they're unrelated stock.
Unrelated stock.
So you could bring F1 to each other and then we create F2. And then some people, like even in the ball python industry, I mean, they go F3, F4, F5, F6.
Okay.
Because there's traits and mutations they're trying to pull out.
Okay.
So sometimes it's detrimental to the species, what they're trying to produce, and sometimes it's outstanding,
Sometimes line breeding brings out a trait that you're desiring.
So, so like you had mentioned, so with ball python, so like, I know there's one species or one morph paint job. Is it the spinners, which tend to have a little bit more of neuro issues?
The ball pythons,
Yeah.
the spiders,
Or spiders.
and they're kind of like the jaguars as far as the carpet pythons.
Okay.
And I say it's a neurological kind of defect within them. But in order to create those jaguars, that's kind of it's an old story. If I got it correct, I think it was Jan Erik Envel who produced those from, I think, Norway maybe. He was maybe Norwegian.
Okay.
And he did it with coastal carpet pythons, and he bred coastals, and he says he produced this weird looking one. And so he held it back, and then there was only one of them, and then he held it back, and then he bred it like, I want to say 3 years after, and then he produced just a few eggs, and he produced one more jaguar out of it. So then the following years he produced the original one that he created was unique, that was the jaguar morph, and then he bred it the same pair again, and this time he produced, I want to say, 6 jaguars and 4 normals, something like that. So then it was a hot ticket. What is this? What's going on with the jaguars?
Yeah.
So nobody knew about the neurological thing or whatever, but it may have just naturally occurred from line breeding that way he did in order to produce that animal.
Sure.
And so once he line bred it for so long that eventually it became detrimental. But the jaguars actually, the mutation is so unique and so cool how it brings out the colors and the patterns on it, that the neurological thing doesn't bother me so much, probably because I have a huge collection of carpet pythons that I don't have to hold them all.
Yeah.
So those jaguars, I could just use it for the genetics and then,
Yeah.
and then play with it like, Dr. Frankenstein's laboratory in a sense and see what it does. But they bred those jaguars to everything, to the Iriangias, to the diamonds, the jungles.
Okay.
So there's versions of jaguars mixed in with all the subspecies of carpets at this
Yeah.
point.
And the snakes too, even if it does have something neurological, they're still able to eat and live their life as any animal would.
The thing about the jaguars too is it's a co-dominant genetic.
Yeah.
So when you breed the jaguar to any type of carpet, you're going to get immediate results. So being co-dominant, you'll see results at very first breeding.
Yep.
But it may be detrimental to it in a sense because they line bred to produce the jaguars, which is, as far as I'm concerned, is kind of a rumor on the street because wasn't there. I didn't see how exactly.
Sure.
This is what I've been told. But every time there's a co-dominant, there's a superform. So the superform of the jaguar is actually leucistic. It's all white.
Oh yeah.
But it dies right out of the egg, and it's a
Okay.
lung issue that its lungs are weak and it just doesn't survive. Where like if you see like a zebra, there's another morph, but it comes from just the jungles. There's a superform of the jungle of the zebras that's actually, they call it the super zebra, and it's a patternless snake.
Okay.
But it's not detrimental because the zebras haven't been line bred for as long. They've been outsourced because it's co-dominant. They were able to outsource that into the other jungles, so that superform isn't detrimental to it.
True. Well, I mean, here's an example. So this is one of your own animals, zebra
jaguar.
Yeah. So then that's that mix of both those. Are those both?
Those are two co-dominants.
Co-dominants.
Two visual co-dominants. So like if you bred this animal to a normal animal, you'll get zebras, jaguars,
And
zebra jags, and normals.
And probably normal.
So you probably get 4 different looking animals out of the same clutch.
It's a beautiful animal. I mean, this is
thank you.
one I've had my eye on for a while, so I'm just kind of, making space.
Unfortunately, with this one, it is super mean. So, like, if you wanted to touch it, the first thing you would touch is its teeth.
Okay.
So,
and what is that? Why is that?
It's just its demeanor. Like I was talking earlier, some have good demeanor, some
It's just
don't.
the snake.
The jaguar neurological thing that I've noticed too.
Okay.
We've produced, I don't even know how many jaguars at this point. I couldn't even count. Hundreds, hundreds of them. But they, it tends to be more of a stress issue.
Okay.
I've had a jaguar that was super friendly for the first 3.5 years of its life. And then I had a friend come over and we're like, oh, you got to check this out. This is so cool. So as he held it, I didn't realize it, but he has a pet dog and he was covered in dog fur. So the snake never smelled a dog before. And so it just triggered something in it. So it tried to bite him. Jennifer got a hold of it. Jennifer got bit a few times, but the snake was never the same after that.
Okay.
You know?
Interesting.
Here, Jen, put this one.
So yeah, I mean, but that's a beautiful snake, and you could see the temperament on it. This thing's like a puppy. I mean,
No, all carpet pythons have blue tongues. I don't know if you.
no, I
You see
I
that?
don't know. I'm not sure if
They
we,
all have blue tongues.
but no.
Well, you can see that in the head on this. You can see the
Oh, yeah, yeah.
indentation. Like I was talking about the convex concave.
Yeah, let me see real quick before you put it away. Mention that again about its head. Here, let me.
Here.
Okay, so you're talking about how it's a little bit more. It's coming down. like
Yeah,
a
in the
divot.
indentation, a divot in the middle of its head.
Yeah, I see. And that means it's obviously
Mature.
Mature.
Mm-hmm.
So, and you were mentioning too, a beautiful animal, such a gorgeous. I mean, if you're looking for carpet python, any snake really, he's the guy to go to. I mean, this is a gorgeous animal. But and the temperament is great. You said about females about 3 years, so it's not necessarily grams. Like I know a lot of reptiles, they do like, oh, it has to be this many grams to breed. With you, it's more, you're recommending more the age of the animal.
Yeah, the maturity is always best. And you know what? You can actually try and breed them early on. And people do it, especially when they get into the morphs and the mutations, because they want to return on that morph as fast as they can. But if you just waited 1 year, it'd be better. Because if you breed them early on, you have to wait a year. Because now they really tax their systems. So if you breed them at an early age, now you have to give them a year off. And then you can go 2 years on again. You're better off just waiting 1 more year and then do 2 years on and then a year off.
Okay.
You'll get a better yield of your clutches.
Exactly. All right, what else did you bring us?
I got a jungle carpet python.
All right. Let's see.
I'm gonna put this guy away.
And how old was this one?
We hatched this one in 2008.
2008.
This jungle carpet python we hatched in 2011. This one just recently came back into my collection. Someone was selling it, but it was one that I sold and I liked it. Like, I'm gonna bring this one back.
Yeah, I hear you. Yeah, now that is a pretty animal. Let's see. So this is a jungle carpet python. How old?
2011. Now again, in the wild, they don't look anything like this. And a lot of people with the jungles, they have such a wide variant of what they're trying to blend into in the wild. Come here, girl. Over here. He wants to see your head. That again, once you actually put your fingerprint on it and you start selectively breeding them, it's different than in the wild. Because in the wild, because a lot of people when they see the tipping on it, where you see how the black and yellow is,
Yeah.
they call it tipping, where the black goes into the yellow goes into the black. And they say, oh, that's got diamond influence to it, the diamond carpets. But that's not necessarily true. Because to fit into the wild, they have to adapt to different things. So like the netting may be beneficial at times. They call it netting. And sometimes it doesn't work to their advantage. But again, as we go and selectively breed them, people like that, so they breed for that, and some people don't.
Such a gorgeous animal. And so yeah, this is that bicolor, just those yellows and those blacks.
And in the wild, there's jungles that are tricolored too, but typically they are just bicolored.
Beautiful snake. Yeah, and that blue tongue too, like you said.
Mm-hmm. Here, Jen.
And so what would you say, so starting out as with any snake really, how big is a hatchling carpet python, jungle carpet python, let's say? How big is
they
a
vary
hatchling?
too. There's like I was saying for the adult sizes. So the IJs are pretty small. They're pretty tiny. And you see a difference when you look at a baby Aryan giant compared to a baby coastal carpet. Because the baby coastal carpets are really long as babies, where the Aryan giants are shorter. You know, they tend to as they get older, like the size of a ball python, but it's not as fat. You know.
So, I mean, are you starting off your hatchlings with pinkies or hoppers, or what are we?
I started them with fuzzies.
Fuzzies, okay.
So they don't like too small because they're pythons. They don't like too small to start with. They don't tend to refuse it. They don't recognize it. If you give them a fuzzy, they'll eat it. And then I actually use their heat pits. I don't feed any of my animals live. Even out of the eggs, I feed nothing live.
Okay.
So
You do frozen thawed?
I'll do frozen thawed, everything. And then what I do with them is I put them in warm water, and so that when I offer their meals to them, they'll use their heat pits because they could sense the heat on it, and they smell it too. So that heat pits actually really triggers them to really want to attack and get it.
Nice.
And of course, when they're first starting, it's always good if you can actually feed them head first because instinctively they want to go for the eye shine of their animals that they're preying on.
Okay.
So it's sometimes their first meals, they don't hit the head, they don't eat it by the face, they tend to drop it, let it go, then they don't know what to do with it because it's just laying on the ground, and it's not something they would actually deal with in the wild. Because out of the eggs, they tend to head up. They don't want to be on the ground. They head up into the trees.
Okay.
So when they get to be adults, they get size on them, they tend to head down from the trees, and then they'll spend more time on the ground instead of up in the trees.
True. And would you say that, I mean, most hatchlings that you could pick up at a show or off morph market from you, are they like pretty quick to feed? Or, I mean, I'm assuming you probably already have them well fed and...
Yeah, I don't sell anything unless I have 6 meals in like 2 sheds.
Okay.
You know? And the thing about them that makes them so unique, too, because I wish I could sell them right out of the egg because they go through an ontogenetic color change.
Yep.
So, like the baby carpet pythons, whether it's a jungle, Irian Jaya, any of them, they don't look anything like what they would look like as an adult. So every time they shed their skin, they get brighter and brighter and brighter until they get to their mature colors, you know?
So you're basically like, you know, if the snake looks dull or looks pretty, it's going to get prettier, most likely.
It is. It's hard to judge as babies. I kind of have an eye now for doing this for so many years. But so I kind of have an eye so I can kind of pick the ones I think are going to turn out nice. But usually within a couple of sheds, you kind of really know.
Okay.
But I want the animal to be established so that customers don't get animals like not feeding.
Exactly.
I have sold them out of the egg, but only to like other breeders that really know what they're doing.
True.
So anybody else out there on the market should actually go by the same principles as me. They shouldn't be selling an animal that's not established, and it's just bad.
I agree. I believe in ethics and ethical treatment for these reptiles, and so I'm very supportive of breeders who want to promote that and offer animals that are well established and are going to make for great pets or a great animal for people in the hobby. Going back to these 2 pythons you brought in today, one was 2008 and one was 2011.
Yes.
How often would you say you handle these animals? Because their temperament is
not
great.
as often as I used to.
Yeah.
You know,
I mean, just like once a week or...
No, not even. Well, during cleaning, so probably
Yeah.
once a week they get handled, but not actually like out and being handled all the time.
Yeah.
But once they're raised to a certain point, they know that you're helping them. They're captive. You know, they're captive for you. So they're used to it. So they're not going to be aggressive as much. They do have a feeding response, and people they'll mistake that feeding response as aggression when it's actually they're just hungry, and they're hard hitters.
Yeah.
So when you feed them a rat or something, they hit hard. So and if they miss, they're going to get you.
Well, what I heard was so when you look at different types of snakes, arboreal versus ground dwellers, the arboreals are more likely to tag you and hold on, or tag and hold on to their prey. So, like, let's say they're feeding off of birds or objects in trees, they can't let that meal go.
That's a great point because most arboreal snakes have evolved longer teeth. Like if you think of a rattlesnake, has its first 2 fangs and it uses it to penetrate and inject the venom. Carpet pythons have kind of like those 2 big fangs, but each tooth behind it slowly gets smaller.
Yep.
So they don't just have 2 big fangs; they have 2 ones behind it, and they slowly get smaller towards the back of the mouth. But on the bottom of its jaw, it has 2 fangs also to help grab its prey. In the wild, they'll eat birds, and that's why they have that, is to penetrate the feathers to hold on to them.
Okay.
But in Australia, actually, one of their main diets is sugar gliders.
Really?
And they'll eat sugar gliders and find them, and they like those.
Interesting. I never knew that.
Yeah.
Wow, those are those little guys that are, you see them at the expos. They
Yeah,
look
they're
cute.
so cute. Yeah.
I didn't know. Yeah, wow. Yeah. So, do you recommend then? Let's say I'm Joe Schmo and I want to get a carpet python. If I'm keeping it and I don't have 50 snakes, should I be feeding it in a separate tub? Should I be taking it out and doing it so that we can limit the feeding response? Or
No, I feed them in the same enclosures.
okay,
Like when I approach the carpet pythons in their cages, I'll approach them with a hook first, or sometimes I'll miss their cage. So if I miss their cage, then they know they're not getting fed. They get used to that.
okay,
So if you miss their cage a little bit, then you can go in, change their water, do maintenance that you need to do, and they're not going to be aggressive that way then.
yeah,
So
nice. What would you say the average lifespan is for carpet python or Aryan jara? Out of, I mean, I'm not super familiar with snakes, but are they middle range life expectancy? Are they one of the longer ones?
they say they live 15 to 20 years,
Okay.
but like my female, again, she was imported in 1993 or 94. She's still alive.
Wow.
So she's up there in age. She's very well taken care of, you know.
Yeah, exactly.
But that's usually more the oddity than the norm. So I'd put it right about 15, 20 years, more towards 20 years under the right conditions.
Okay.
If a snake, this is important too. Maybe I should go back to breeding for a second.
Yeah.
Like when I go into breeding, this is the time where Halloween is the last day I feed. So I'll feed them, make sure everybody's fed on Halloween, right? And then I let it run through their systems, keep their cages up to where it needs to be. I keep their hot spots around 94, between 92 and 94 is their hot spot. And then go up and down from the branches to thermoregulate their temperatures as long as they have that spot. But the cages have got to be spotless clean, because once a week and a half after that, we're going to start cycling them. So that when I cycle the cages, I bring them down to room temperature in my room, which is like 70 degrees. So overnight, temperatures are 70 degrees. And then in the morning, I'll turn them back on as the sun's coming up.
Okay.
So I'll coordinate that with the sun coming up. I'll turn their heat back on. And then once the heat is back on, then I can mist the animals if need be. Because if it's raining outside, they know it's raining. And I mist them accordingly. They can feel the barometric pressure drop, believe it or not. So I'll mist them accordingly with that. And then after cycling them for about a week, then I'll introduce the males to the females. And again, when I do introduce the males to the females, it's got to be a spotless, clean cage, because you don't want to interrupt them. And then I'll mist the animals as they're being introduced to each other, and then watch over them. So I don't want them to have a feeding response and see a movement or something that's going on, and then attack each other, because it's happened to me. I've had carpet pythons kill each other during the breeding season. So at that point, then once they're breeding and I have lockups, then I can separate them. And then I'll feed the male, give them a little bit of a meal. Give the females a tiny meal, nothing big at all, just for some energy.
Yeah.
And then I can move that male on to another female if I want to breed, because that male can breed to multiple females.
True.
But at that point, then you'll see them. They'll start thermoregulating. They'll have a post-ovulation shed. At that point, they have their post-ovulation shed. They'll flip upside down before they'll thermoregulate the eggs.
Okay.
They'll be upside down. You'll think they're dead. They're like, oh my gosh,
what's
this thing's
going on?
dead. But they're thermoregulating, and it's important at that time not to let your temperatures get too hot, because then it can kill the sperm, and then you can get slugs.
True.
King tails, things like that. I keep my hot spot, like I said, around 92, 93.
Okay.
And once I actually do the breeding, once I have them locked up together, I don't cycle anymore. I keep the temperatures up to where they're supposed to be. So their hot spots are there all day and night.
Yeah.
And then once they start thermoregulating, she has her post-op shed. It's 24 days after that, she'll be dropping the eggs.
Oh.
And then once the eggs are there, then you put them in an incubator. We incubate them I put them at between 88, 89 degrees. So I set them at like 88.5 degrees.
Okay.
Just so if I see there's a change in the temperature, it may look like a half a degree or a degree, but it's actually it's telling me like it's, it's instead of being like 88.5 degrees, and all of a sudden you see it's like 90 degrees, you're like, it's like a red flag. Like, whoa.
Yeah.
Something's, I
What's
gotta
going on?
cool this off. I gotta fix this. So actually, once the eggs are there and you keep them at that temperature, they'll hatch. Right today is about 56 days, 58 days after that point they'll hatch.
Okay. So with snakes or with these types of pythons, are they like with turtles? I know temperatures can determine the sex of the animal.
Mm.
Is it the same with snakes?
No, people have tried to prove that, right? But it's not. It's
Okay.
not the same.
So it's a mixed bag. You get what you get.
Yeah, it's a roll of the dice.
Okay.
Whether it's going to be males, females.
And then going back to the topic of breeding, when what time of the year is the breeding season? Like in terms of nature for these pythons, and then when do you start to breed your animals? Do you breed them once a year, multiple times a year?
I breed them once a year, just like I said, just right now, like
Yeah.
October 31st is the last day
Halloween.
I feed, and that's the beginning of when I start the process.
Okay.
But you have to remember, Australia's on the opposite side of the world, so it's our winter, but it's their spring.
True. So they've already.
So that's why it kind of falls in nice for breeding here because the sun going up and down is almost mimicking exactly what they do in the wild.
True. And then you said about 56 days is when you first start seeing them to peep out the.
Yeah, they'll start pipping. I'll give them a day, sometimes a day, a little over a day, to let them all come out, and then at that point, then I'll just open up the rest of the eggs that are there because sometimes they could break an egg tooth and they
Okay.
can't get out of the egg.
Okay.
So at that point, I'll go ahead and open them, but I'll leave them in the egg for a little bit, see what they do, and then after they still don't come out, then I'll just take them out.
Yeah. What would you say what are the average clutch sizes for a jungle carpet versus an Aryan Jaya versus?
It all varies to how old they are.
Okay.
And maturity. I think we may have had one of the largest Aryan Jaya clutches in the world. I think we had 36 eggs at one point. And for Aryan Jayas, that's massive. With
How many
coastals,
hatched out of those?
We had a good set. I think 32 out of 36 hatched.
Wow.
So it was really good. And she had multiple clutches of over 30 eggs, over her later years. We haven't bred her in 5 years now.
Okay.
I bred her about 5 years ago because I wanted to try and improve out a certain morph, which is kind of top secret.
Yeah.
But I was trying to prove something out, so I bred one of her offspring back to her to see if I could actually hit on it.
Yeah.
And I didn't hit on it like I wanted to, so I just kept her retired at that point. But I pulled her out of retirement for like 4. She wasn't breeding for like 4 years when I tried to breed her again, and I'm like, it didn't work out well because I could tell she was old. There was a lot of king tails, animals that didn't make it. And there were a handful that did, So I'm like, I'm not gonna do that to her again.
Okay. And what would you say in terms?
Back to the clutch sizes.
Yeah, go ahead.
Like the first time out, like let's say you had an Aryan Jaya that was 3.5 years old, she may have a clutch of only 6 eggs,
Sure.
6 to 8 eggs. But the next year she gets some size on, she'll throw 14 eggs, 12,
Okay.
14. So you can almost double it from the one year to the next. And then they'll slow down at that point. Like take a year off, the next year she'll probably throw 18, 20. So a lot of it just depends on the maturity and how old the animal is.
Do you like if you palpate the snake, can you feel when it's gravid?
You can feel the
Okay.
eggs. Mhm.
Do you
But
also-
carpets is a little more difficult because
Sure.
they're real strong. So you have to get them just right for them to be relaxed.
Okay.
And the most easiest way is because when they're out crawling around and they tend to tense up their bodies. So when they go crawl back into the enclosure is the best time to do it.
Sure.
Because then when they're crawling into the enclosure, then you can actually put your fingers underneath the subcaudal scales, and then you can
Actually
feel the eggs in there.
Nice. Yeah, but okay, so that's fascinating. With I had one thing I wanted to mention, but I kind of forgot. Okay, so yeah, but going back to just keeping these species of pythons, what would you say you're recommended for, like, just a regular snake keeper, not necessarily a breeder, but hey, I want to get a carpet python, jungle carpet python, or Aryan Jaya. What would you say you recommend for a setup?
For the cage itself?
The cage itself, yeah.
Yeah. Not a lot of glass because
Okay.
the glass they feel exposed. So as long as they have some height to it, again, like they want to be able to crawl around the perimeter without touching head to tail, and you can get away with a little bit smaller cage as long as you have a branch in it for them to climb up into it. but you don't want to spend all their time on the branches. So if they
True.
eat and they eat their meals, you want them to go on a hot spot to digest it. But sometimes they may sit on the branches just as using it as a security blanket. But again, it's kind of the same thing. I would do a bigger cage once they get older.
Sure.
They can live in a tub for like the first year and a half
Okay.
of their life. But then once they get like a year and a half, 2 years, then you want to put them in a arboreal setup with some glass, at least one pane of glass to see out. But I don't, like I said, again, you don't want to put it in like a fish tank where it's all glass around
Yeah,
it.
they want that shelter, that darkness.
And it doesn't, those fish tanks don't work well for the humidity either.
Okay.
They don't hold humidity because it's open top. So you kind of want an enclosure.
Sure. Like, what do you think? Like at rough dimensions, like a 2x2x4, or like
A 2x2x2 is perfect
Even.
for up to about 4 or 5 years old.
Okay.
You know? Maybe 3, 4 years old. And then you go with a 4 foot wide, 2 feet deep, 2 feet high.
Okay.
As long as it has a glass front to it.
sure.
And a branch that you could put in it, and they'll be okay.
Okay.
Just something for them to get off the ground, for them to feel comfortable is a lot. It doesn't have to be super tall. Just somewhere they can have a branch to climb on.
Okay. And would you say you mentioned definitely an underground or like a heat pad or something for that
I go with underbelly heat.
underbelly heating?
Underbelly heat, yeah.
And then do they need to have both like a basking spot and a UVB, or is that kind of a miss?
No, I don't. I have lights in my cages, but the only time I use the lights is if I'm actually entertaining and having people look at them.
Yeah.
Then I turn the lights on, but they don't want the lights on.
Because you have that natural sunlight coming in,
Yeah, the sunlight doesn't actually hit them.
but
They shine in, but they still sense the light.
Yeah. Okay. So, and that's why too. If you're keeping these animals in, if people keep them in rack systems, they're not necessarily having lighting.
Yeah.
It's more the underbelly heating.
I may make it look easy because we live on a farm. We own a farm.
Oh, okay.
So, like, most people don't have that luxury to have a farm and a barn and,
Yeah.
the space to do it, But I started small and worked my way up to it.
Well, yeah.
So it worked.
Exactly.
So you can still make it succeed with just a room that has one window that's shining in. You can still
Enough.
keep a decent collection and breed them.
Okay.
Be successful.
Exactly. Well, it's persistence in anything and passion, and you'll get there with anybody. But not everybody who's watching this or listening in necessarily wants to become a breeder, but they maybe want to enjoy the animal, and maybe they do want to breed them and see what happens or try to.
Yeah. They're incredibly addicting, just like all snakes. Once
Yeah.
you get one, you want to get another one.
Exactly. Yeah.
I would recommend starting with an Aryan Jaya just because
Okay.
the temperament is the most docile. And then jungles are a favorite amongst people because they love the colors and stuff,
Yeah.
which is okay once you get familiar with the carpets and you can start reading their demeanor. Then you can move up to it. A coastal isn't the best first time carpets for more advanced carpet people,
Okay.
So for me, it was a lot like solving a puzzle with all the snakes. I don't just do carpets. We do the boas and the colubrids and
Yes.
across the board, all kinds over the years. The carpets are just one of my favorites because they're difficult to breed also. So if you could breed a carpet python, you could probably breed just about anything.
Exactly.
Because you had the general understanding of it.
Yeah. Once you learn the animal and can keep it, and then keep a healthy animal, and then you are successful at breeding, then I'm sure it's just boom.
You
Riding a bike.
Yeah, you're gonna want to work your way up to the next cool thing that you haven't had.
Exactly. So would you say, in terms of what's out there on the market now, I've seen a lot of beautiful animals come from you, especially from Morph Market. Is there any new crazy morph that's coming out? You don't have to talk about. You mentioned a secret project. We don't have to go there, but are there some things coming?
I hope so. Phil at Star Reptiles, he does an outstanding job with mixing a lot. He keeps his pure lines the way they are, but he does a lot with the morphs.
Okay.
And, he's 10 steps ahead of me. Paul Harris, Precision Reptiles, does outstanding stuff too.
Okay.
As far as different things you could do. But right now, there's only a handful of morphs and mutations that are out there. I think one of the newer ones is a hypo, and it comes from the coastals.
Sure.
And they're starting to mix that in with the other animals and see what it does. But once you get a new morph out there, they want to mix to every single thing that's there.
Yeah.
But a lot of them are pretty old morphs because, there's the zebras, the jaguars, the albinos, obviously, the granites. So they're out there. I always wanted to actually breed like a granite to a zebra, just see what happened because they're both so busy patterned.
Yeah.
Just see what would happen. I don't know if anybody's ever done it, but I thought that would be neat.
Well, you have to. I'm curious now.
I mean, a lot of these projects, we've been working on for 18, 20 years that we're finally having come to fruition. So it's not something that you can jump into and say, I'm going to make $1 million, because you're really not. Your passion has to come first.
Exactly. I think that's important for people to understand is I think we're all animal lovers at heart, and, people get into the hobby and it just naturally comes where they grow their collections. It's not, a business first mindset where, I'm going to put this amount of money into it and I'm going to be making this much money for these morphs and blah, blah, blah. I really don't think that's a healthy way of looking at it. And it's more about respect for the animal, love for the animal, passions, and then also just growing our community and growing the hobby. You know what I mean? Because a lot of people, I have a lot of friends, and not a lot of my friends like reptiles or snakes. And it's like, why? My buddy who's at the Animal Expo with me, I recently picked up a Terrahumara boa. It's like a Mexican boa, I think.
Mm-hmm. It's the smallest dwarf. It's the smallest dwarf boa there is.
Yeah, and that's initially why I got that to start out.
It's interesting you brought that up because that's actually an island form too. That's why it's a smaller boa compared to like the Aryan giants are smaller to the other animals.
Yeah, and so I wanted to start out with that and just kind of like use that as a mascot or one of my mascots for Reptile. But it was his first time holding a snake. I said, "Here, hold it." And it's I think Keith said it was only like 6 months or 8 months old. I forget when they were hatched, but
yeah, no, they. I know Keith actually. I think they were just born a couple months ago.
Oh, really? Only 2 months? Okay.
Yeah.
Maybe I mixed that up, but
they're really cool. They have that pewter look to them, like
yeah. They got pink on the side.
Mm-hmm.
I got a video on my YouTube channel, and this whole podcast is going to be on the Reptile YouTube, and if you have a site too, you want to post it too, we can. But I do want to mention that let's go check out. So your company is, or your name, if people want to find out about you, it's Boa Cabana.
Yeah,
right?
Boa Cabana is Jennifer and I started the company, but Rich Donatelli came on board. He kind of took over with a lot of the boas, so I can concentrate on the carpet pythons and colubrids, and he does a lot of the boas.
Okay.
And I think you said you're going to be talking to him soon.
Yes.
And then Abby Burns is the newest addition to the Boa Cabana, who does she's learning a lot, but she has a lot of knowledge of the animals and the passion for them. So she works with us with the animals on both sides with the boas, the carpets, and the colubrids.
Okay, so yeah, so if you go on Morph Market, you can search Boa Cabana, and then because you are at the once in a while, or are you always there at the All Animal Expo?
I don't go as much as I used to, but since that show started, I think it started like 1991.
Yeah,
I was there every show for years and years and years.
So you were at the Lee Watson show.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, and that's where you were at mostly. Yeah, because I forget when Lee passed, but it was initially moved out to Wheaton was the initial, and then now it's here in St. Charles.
I want to say it was about 12 years ago now when he passed.
11.
Yeah. And so then Scott Smith kind of took over, and then he's got the All Animal Expo. So for viewers and listeners in Illinois, there's the All Animal Expo, literally allanimalexpo.com, Scott Smith, and this is at the Kane County Fairgrounds. Is there anything that you wanted to hit on or talk about today about any advice you have for people getting into snakes or people looking to get into carpet pythons or reptiles in general?
Snakes have a memory. People probably don't realize it, but if they're mishandled, they remember it, so they're going to be more aggressive being mishandled. And when it comes to breeding, happy snakes breed. So if you got them under the perfect conditions and things like that, they're happy, they're going to breed. If they're miserable, they're not going to breed. They don't feel comfortable with it, so they won't.
True.
So that's it. I would, if I was to be a beginner getting into the hobby, I would get into animals that you just actually truly love, that want to work with, and
Yeah.
don't look into it as I'm going to make money on this.
Exactly.
Because I mean, we didn't make any money off of this until, I mean, we were well into it. It was just a hobby,
Exactly.
you know.
As opposed to, I got a collection that, oh hey, let's throw these together. Let's see what if they produce anything, and hey, cool. Maybe I want to sell some of my offspring to help perpetuate and feed my other snakes.
Yeah,
You know what I
it's a
mean?
supplemental income when you have success.
Yeah, I mean that's the goal. Really, is a hobby that could self-sustain itself. And some people hit big and they got the knack for it, and obviously you have the knack for it, and you could produce these beautiful animals, which I really don't like how people who are against reptiles and amphibians, they it seems like they're either fearful of them or they're just not experienced or never exposed to them, and they're super afraid of the animals like snakes. A lot of people I know, they might hate snakes or hate reptiles or think they're gross, but it's like, if you just would check out the animal, appreciate its beauty, and hold it, if it's a docile animal, they're just like anything else. You know what I mean? No, I like that, because one thing about the reptile hobby people might not get or might miss on is you learn a lot about science. I mean, you see this in mutations and morphs. People learn about science. They learn about Mendelian genetics, biology, and what it is. And so for kids, for children, if you show them a puppy or a dog, they might be interested in the breed or might think it's cool. But if they're seeing these ball pythons or these boas or these carpet pythons, and they're seeing the different mutations and the genes, and learning about what does recessive mean, what is codominant, dominant, super, what does that mean, and kind of could see a little bit of the biology and genetics. They're learning about science. It's educational,